So on behalf of the Middle East and North Africa program at Northwestern, my name is Wendy Perlman. So I have the honor of beginning our long introduction to Yassin al-Haj Saleh. So as was just said, Yassin al-Haj Saleh is one of the leading intellectual voices of the Syrian revolution. He was arrested at the age of 19 for his membership in the Syrian Communist Party. Political bureau. He spent 16 years in prison from 1980 to 1996. His wife, Samira al-Khalil, was abducted by an armed group nearly 10 years ago and has been missing ever since. In addition to that personal story, Yassin, as a leading thinker, has authored 9 books, including The Impossible Revolution, making sense of the Syrian tragedy, over there for sale, and a book that has its English translation currently in the works, The Atrocious and Its Representation. One of the founders of the Arabic-English platform al-Jamhuriya, he writes for a variety of international publications and is also a contributing writer for New Lines magazine.
Thanks, Wendy. On behalf of New Lines magazine, I want to thank Haymarket Books and its amazing team. Thank you, Dana, Rory, and John, and the entire Haymarket crew, not only for all of the work they've done to make this event possible tonight, but also for taking on Yassin al-Haj Saleh's book, The Impossible Revolution. As Wendy mentioned, Haymarket was the US publisher of the English translation of this book, which was Yassin's first book in English. Yassin has written multiple books in Arabic, and they've been translated into many languages all over the world. But The Impossible Revolution was the very first book of Yassin's to be translated into English and published in the US by Haymarket Books. And as Dana mentioned, we actually held an event sort of in absentia in 2018 when the book came out. We couldn't have Yassin here in the US. He wasn't able to join us, but we had a panel discussion about the book and talked about Yassin in his absence. And now, tonight, I remember at the end of that event, I think we said, one day, inshallah, we will have Yassin present in the flesh, and we will raise a glass with him, and he will be able to talk back and tell us everything we got wrong that night. But no, in all seriousness, it is just such a dream come true to have Yassin sitting here in Haymarket House in Chicago, which is the first city on this multi-city speaking tour that he's doing. He'll be going to Washington, D.C., and Montreal, and Boston, and New York, but Chicago first. This is his first public-facing event in the United States on this book tour. So it's such a thrill. And I want to thank the MENA program at Northwestern for making this event possible in partnership with Haymarket Books and New Lines magazine. I spent several years of my professional life at the MENA program at Northwestern, so I have a very personal relationship with it and with my good friend Wendy Perlman. So, one last word about New Lines magazine. Unlike the books which you will have to pay for, you can just grab copies of New Lines magazine. They are for free. The first 4 print issues, many of you know that New Lines is principally an online publication. It started 3 years ago as an online-only magazine. But about a year ago, we went back to the future and we went in reverse. Most publications started in print and created a website at some point, in many cases discontinued their print operation. We did the opposite. We started as an online magazine, and then 2 years into it decided to launch a print publication. We now have 4 copies. It's a quarterly, so it's been on for a year, and you're welcome to copies. The very first issue we published a year ago contains a beautiful essay by none other than Yassin himself. Now, there's a line from a beautiful little essay by a scholar I don't know personally, Fadi Nasser, of the Lebanese American University in Beirut. He writes, "Not since Edward Said has an intellectual from the Middle East helped the world see itself by looking at the region. Yassin al-Haj Saleh bears witness to the dysfunctions of our world, the cruelty of its exclusions, and the unraveling of solidarities in the face of existential doom. He asks us to look at Syria, its pain, its struggle, its trauma, its people, and their fundamental right to dignity and freedom. He forces us to grapple with the failure of our global solidarities. His words and his defiant life give hope in a world of such monstrous despair. A hope grounded not in romantic ideologies or empty slogans, but in a genuine appreciation for the extraordinary power of ordinary people and their fight for nothing short of their collective freedom.
Thank you, Danny.
When we were deciding on the theme for this event, you said, let's begin with a defeat. What does defeat mean to you, and why do you want to start there?
First of all, thank you for Haymarket Books, for Danny and Wendy, my very dear friends, and for you to show up. Well, we lost the battle for owning our country. Syrians has been living under the same family rule for more than, when the revolution started, it was more than 40 years. Now it is 53 years, which is quite a long time. Most of my life, for instance. Most of, you are not Syrians, but yeah, most of your age, some of them, most of you actually were born after me. So we felt like exiled in our own country. So the uprising the Syrian revolution was about owning the country. But it was like colonizing actually. In some of my work I talked about support of internal colonialism or coloniality and power. So the uprising was about this, about owning the country or owning politics in the country, because we were denied citizenship rights. For one, I was deprived of my civil rights for 15 years after my 16 years in jail. So up to the uprising, I was without civil rights. But honestly, a single Syrian has civil rights. So I didn't feel when I was in the country denied any rights, because everybody was without rights. So owning politics meant in the Syrian context two things: to speak for yourself or to talk about public issues, and to gather with other people. We have a short experience of trying to own politics. It's called Damascus Spring in 2001, and it was the main thing about Damascus Spring was forums, or forums, the plural was forum. Well, gatherings of people in dozens or in few hundreds talking about politics in a very critical way. So this is because Syrians before the Damascus Spring and before the revolution were denied expressing themselves and talking about their grievances, their demands, their aspirations. And they were prevented even more harshly from gathering, from meeting, from organization. So the Damascus Spring was a short experience of this trying to own politics. We Syrians were living under poverty line, under political poverty line. 100% of Syrians were under, even those who were supporters of the regime, right? They were not allowed to organize or to talk freely. So when the revolution came, it was about this. It was about challenging this this long experience of being denied the right to speech and the right to gather. And the release, the first phase of the revolution, peaceful. It was people, gatherings of people from dozens to hundreds of thousands in Hama, for instance, in July and August 2011. And they were talking or chanting or expressing their political demands. This failed. We've been crushed. The revolution is defeated, and the meaning that the aspiration to reclaim the country and to all politics, to be citizens, to be citizens, to talk, to speak for ourselves and to organize this has been crushed. And with huge losses. I mean, at least 500,000 people were killed, and people are still being killed, by the way. Now, while Gaza is bombed by the Israelis, the regime is, with the Russians and the Iranians are bombing Idlib. And 7 million displaced outside the country, which is around 30% of the population. It's a huge thing. And the country is divided to 4 Syrians at least, not to mention Golan Heights, which has been occupied by Israel for 56 years now, or a bit more than 6 years. So it's a huge thing. It is, and we have 5 occupation powers, Iran, the US, Russia, Turkey, and before all, Israel. So it is a situation that we don't know many examples of. And this meaning, yeah, there's a big defeat, but also a big, something unprecedented on the global level, in my opinion. And maybe Syria is not important to many people. It is important for us Syrians, because it is our country. It is the only country that we have. Well, now we have 127 countries, actually, according to a report by Human Rights Watch, only to 22. Syrians were scattered in 127 countries. Maybe we have conquered more countries in the last 20 years. So, but Syria became important because because much of the world is in Syria, and a big percent of Syrians are in the world, everywhere. So in this meaning, Syria is a microcosm, and it is important to people everywhere, those who are interested in a different future of humanity. It is because it's a microcosm, and because in a different way, the world is becoming, maybe we'll talk about this later, is progressively Syrianized.
Yassin, I mean, there's a lot more to be said about this question of defeat, by the way, and I hope that we will get into it in the Q&A. This is just to open the topic. But in a recent essay for New Lines magazine on what you call liquid imperialism, which is your coinage that you've come up with with reference to the late Polish sociologist Zygmunt Bauman. But in that essay, you detail the confluence of multiple factors that short-circuited the Syrian democratic struggle. Regional and global powers, which you just referred to, the United States, Russia, and then regionally, Iran, Turkey, Israel. Another factor is what you call the internal colonialism of the Assad regime. And then thirdly, there were the Salafi jihadists who you have this interesting term for them. You call them the conquered imperialists. So let's take these on one at a time. You've already touched on the regional and global powers. What do you mean by the internal colonialism of the Assad regime?
Yeah. Actually, because it is, the country has been ruled. Look, the Ba'ath Party seized power in Syria in March 1963. So it is 60 years and a half now. From the very first moment, there was a state of exception. And Syria lived under this state exception that was legitimized by the war against Israel, the national enemy. In 2012, the legitimizing ideology turned to the war on terror. So there's a continuous war, actually, but it was against the enemy, the national enemy. Now it is against those who oppose the regime. And this state of exception is one of the, it is one of the essential characteristics of colonialism. Colonial powers don't rule by law; they rule by directives and by commands given to separate through security apparatuses and these things. Then there's the very brutal way of dealing with the people. Like the colonial powers, then there is divide and rule. I mean, the regime, the Assad regime, especially is expert at dividing the population and instilling fear among them and frightening some sections of the society. Frightening them. Other sections are against you, or they will target you, especially. Syria is a society with many religions and confessional communities. So there is also this thing that characterizes the French colonial rule in Syria after the First World War, after the First World War to the end of the Second World War. So it's the same actually there. Then there is this destruction of political life, of political plurality in the country. I mean, the regime shows the Syrian society a sovereign face, that all the society should be an army. It is internal front, while it deals with the external world and politics and finding political solutions. So it is like also colonial power on this, from this side. So this is about the internal colonies. Syria has been colonized by a family rule that divided Syrians, that dealt with them very brutally, and that resort to political solutions with external powers. The only, for instance, the only commitment that the Assad regime kept so faithfully is the relation with Israel. The Golan Heights front had been the calmest, more than Sinai, more than there's relation, diplomatic relation between Egypt and Israel, and more than Jordan front, which is also there's political relation, far calmer and with extremely controlled by the regime. So if you and now about the conquered imperialists, it is, I call the Islamists, especially the Salafi jihadists, conquered imperialists, because on one level their imagery is obsessed by the ghosts of our old empires, the Muslim old empires. At the same time, they are conquered, they are weak, so their problem with the American imperialism or the Russians is that there is no emancipatory dimension in it. It is that we should rule. We are the sovereign. So it is not about liberation. It is not about freedom. In this meaning, I call them conquered imperialists. Actually, it is a title of book. I published it in 2019. And in Syria, actually, they were extremely destructive. Jabhat al-Nusra, Daesh, and So Syria is a showcase of imperialism represented by the US and Russia, sub-imperial powers, regional powers, Israel, Iran, Turkey, a colonial power, internal colonialism represented by the Assad family, and conquered imperialists represented by Salafi jihadis. So also in this, from this perspective, it is a unique situation.
Well, so we're thinking about all of those different types of imperialisms or forces that short-circuited the Syrian revolution. Makes us think of the title of your book, The Impossible Revolution. So what do you mean by impossible? In what sense was it impossible? because it was doomed from the start? Could it have taken a different route? Was it impossible because it was unthinkable to ever happen in the first place? Or are there maybe many different meanings to the term impossible?
If you ask me a bit before the revolution that will there be a revolution in Syria, maybe my answer would have been negative, to be honest. And I guess so many Syrians would show hesitancy about it. But it happened. So it was impossible to imagine, but it really happened. But then the idea took hopefully some interesting turn. The destruction of the revolution is impossible. I mean, I hope I gave some idea about it with these 5 powers, with the conquered imperialists, with the huge losses, with the unprecedented human suffering, with displacement of 7 million Syrians. It was unimaginable, impossible, extremely impossible actually. That no one imagined that it can take these dimensions in Syria. In early 2012, I wrote an article, a short article, saying what can the regime do more than what it had done up to that time. It was almost a year after the uprising. Would they attack cities and neighborhood by warplanes? And it happened just 2 or 3 months later. It happened. It started happening in July 2012. And the barrel bombs were not invented at that time. It also took 2 or 3 months for the barrel bombs. But then what I built on this is that now the revolution was impossible. And the instruction of the revolution and the Syrian society have been impossible. The solution in Syria should be impossible in a way. I mean, it is a farce with this huge tragedy, to think that the Constitutional Committee or the meetings in Asatana or nowhere, like this is the political solution. This is very insulting to our struggle. A huge tragedy with these very farcical, cheating, despicable, I don't find really good words for this. So it should be impossible. Impossible doesn't mean that it cannot happen. It is just that the foreign powers should leave, the refugees should go back, there should be meaningful, substantial political change. These are the impossible, and if we are serious, if we want to have real peace and real future for the country, this should happen. That the Syrians own their country, as I said in my answer for the first question. It is all about owning Syria. Syrians owning their country, reclaiming their country as citizens. So this is impossible while we have 5 occupation powers, while the same regime is still in power, which is the most tragic and the most the worst feature of war struggle, and that the refugees would go back if they want, of course. I mean, so many of them want if they would be safe. 1 million in Lebanon, almost 1 billion in Jordan, 3 million and a half in Turkey, many hundreds of thousands in Europe. I guess so many of them would like to go back.
Yassin, you've noted that there are 3 dominant discourses about Syria and the Middle East more generally in the world. The first you call geopolitical. The second you call culturalist or civilizationist. And the third you say might be called top-down anti-imperialist. That's a very interesting phrase, top-down anti-imperialist. So But you say that what these discourses, for whatever differences they might have, what they have in common is that they deny the agency of Syrians struggling for democracy and social justice. So maybe instead of going through each of them, although in the Q&A perhaps people can ask about the geopolitical, the civilizationist, I'd like to focus for purposes of this discussion on this category that you call top-down anti-imperialist. What exactly do you mean by that, and how does this top-down anti-imperialism deny Syrian agency?
Allow me still to say something about the geopolitical civilization. So the discourse of governments in the mainstream in the West is the geopolitical. So it is about capitals, about presidents, about foreign ministries, about armies. So Damascus, Riyadh, Cairo, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, whatever. And the presidents and these, MBS and these people. This is the geopolitical thing. And wars, of course. Wars are there, terror is there, and oil and issues. The civilizations talk all the time about Islam, and, Sunnah, Shia. So the population are defined by their supposed religious beliefs. And with a primordial approach to these beliefs. So the Sunnis are like this, the Shia are like this, the Alawites are like this. So, and they have been all the time like this. Obama said in the book that you edited with Nader Hashimi that, well, it is, what can we do? It is Sunnah and Shia killing each other for thousands of years. Thousands of years. Very, very stupid thing, actually. Very, very lazy and very from the cerebral president of the US. So, what I was not thinking before the uprising, that there are many of our leftist comrades, they have a discourse about Syria. Actually, it was not there. Before the uprising, it was not there. And one of my shocking experiences that after the uprising, that many leftists were against the Syrian uprising. I thought that these were our comrades, and of course they were in support our struggle. They know, and it was, at least it was easy to know that many communists were in jail and fought against the regime and for democracy, for justice. And so it was a really shocking thing. And I started to see this top-down imperialism. These comrades, these big comrades, have their own grand schematic analysis about the world. It is one big fight against American imperialism. All the other struggles are annexing. So there is no autonomy of other struggles. There is no autonomy of Syrians struggling in Syria, of Iraqis in Iraq, Egyptians, especially Syrians actually, because in Egypt and Tunisia and other countries, they were perceived to be closer to the American imperialism. So the struggle against American imperialism is also, or they were against Mubarak regime or against Zain al-Abidine in Tunisia because they were perceived to be close to the Americans. In Syria, it was quite different. So our struggle is accepted only if it can be, it can relate itself to this grand battle against American imperialism that to be honest, I don't see our grand comrades doing anything. They are quite safe. They are in the best universities in the world. They are okay. They are very well, and they were all the time reprimanding us and blaming us for not being good fighters, activists against imperialism. So it was really a shameful page of the history of the left. It is top-down imperialism because they don't see how people were fighting for their life. The real struggle against imperialism is against internal colony in Syria, against the occupations powers in Syria and Palestine here and there. Those are the people who are fighting imperialism and for democracy and for rights and for equality. Not those who are in New York or in MIT or in Chicago, possibly, who are just telling you all the time how to fight or how to understand the world and how to be a real leftist. There are many examples I wouldn't, I would not volunteer to give any now, but yeah, so this is what I meant by it.
What you're calling this top-down anti-imperialism, it's also a very selective form of anti-imperialism because it focuses in a very myopic way on one specific instance of imperialism or form of imperialism, which is US imperialism, and to the exclusion of other imperialisms, Russian imperialism, Iranian imperialism, or in the internal colonialism of the Assad regime. And in so doing, wouldn't you say that this kind of US-centric worldview is its own kind of colonialism?
Yeah, this is what I said actually, and now we have to mention one name. This is what I said in a long essay in New Lines magazine. It was a critic of Noam Chomsky, who's a great thinker and a great activist, a great, one of the great names in of the left and the linguistics in so many fields. So, yeah, it is, American imperialism is really extremely destructive in the Middle East, especially in the Middle East. And we are seeing now what's happening in Palestine with extreme. The US has been an extremist and nihilist power in the Middle East all the time. So when I criticize this myopic approach, it is not to say that American imperialism is not very bad, but to say there are other imperialists, the ones who are targeting Idlib and killing civilians and who have targeted hospitals dozens of times. Only yesterday, Israel, or was it today? Earlier today, they targeted a hospital and they killed hundreds of people. And so it has been happening for years by the Russians. Not to mention the sub-imperial powers of Iran and Turkey. So, and of course, Israel before all. So it is just to develop a more complex, more multi-dimensions analysis of imperialism. I mean, imperialism is not in the sense that we go to the White House or to the Pentagon and find it somewhere. Yeah, in a certain office. It is a relation, a power relation, and when you have occupation powers, these are within this colonial relation. I try to analysis and see as a great example to understand this power relation, this colonial imperialist power relation.
You mentioned Palestine. What have you been thinking these past 11 days while watching these latest events in Palestine and the world, Israel and Gaza, and especially maybe as a participant in the Syrian revolution, but as a human and as a Syrian, what have been your thoughts and your feelings watching this?
For a week, I came to the US a week after. The timing couldn't have been worse in a way and better in another way. And I came as a Syrian activist, as a writer, it was planned to talk about Syria mostly. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, you cannot say a word about Syria without saying something or many things about Palestine. In the Middle East, we have Israel as paradigm of politicide, of political annihilation. Palestinians have been politicized by Israel for 75 years, denied any political entity, any political autonomy. So this paradigm is the one we have in Syria. So we Syrians have been Palestinized for almost, less than the Palestinian people, but for almost 60 years without political rights, without political, without autonomy, without, this is what I was, I refer to as internal colonialism. At the same time, the regime is Israelized, so the paradigm is there. I don't mean that to say that, yeah, they are very, to build false symmetry between them. But I think the paradigm is the same. And we are, in a way, Palestinians. That's why, of course, there are other ideological and emotional elements we, as Syrians, and I guess Arabs, identify easily with the Palestine. We talk the same language, we have the same cuisine, we have almost the same songs and cultural traditions, so it is, yeah, we feel that we are the same. And besides, there were 600,000 Palestinian refugees in Syria before the uprising, and they were crushed like us. Actually, many Palestinians who joined the uprising, I guess there were thousands of martyrs among the Palestinians, the Syrian Palestinians, and they are now scattered for the third or fourth time, like so many Syrians. So, and that's meaning I feel that I feel like I am a Palestinian, actually. Yeah. And besides as a writer, I wrote much about myself here and there. So it is one struggle with different rhythms, different intensities, yeah, different battles. But in essence, it is the same. It is about freedom, it is about justice, it is about independence, it is about owning your country. Yeah.
Yassin, one of the effects of the last 10 days has been, it seems to me, a kind of return of a certain rhetoric, the paradigm of the axis of resistance, which I think it's fair to say had been, for the last several years, somewhat exposed as moribund, as empty, as a kind of fiction, really, by the Syrian uprising, and then, of course, by the uprisings in 2019 in both Lebanon and especially Iraq, where you had, you know, these so-called resistance powers, Iran, Hezbollah in particular, took the side not of the Syrian protesters, but the regime that was crushing and annihilating them. In Lebanon, in October 2019, the streets are full of protesters demonstrating, calling for an end to this awful status quo and ruling regime, and Hezbollah sides not with the protesters, but in fact with the regime of which it is a part, and Iran is on that same side. And then in Iraq it's even bloodier because the Iranian regime is directly involved in actually mass violence and repression against protesters in Iraq. So the point being that this axis of resistance paradigm was exposed as being really nonsensical. It was what I think the late Ulrich Beck would have called a zombie category. That is to say, a category that may have made sense of certain circumstances in the world at some point, but stopped making sense of changing circumstances, and yet the concept goes on living. It's dead, but it goes on living as if it were alive. But now, in the last 10 days, it seems that the rhetoric has shifted again, and you have this, the language of the axis of resistance. Iran is on the side of Hamas, and on the side of resisting what's happening in Israel. So my question to you is essentially, I mean, how do you make sense of this as someone who, you know, has experienced, in a sense, the fiction of the axis of resistance firsthand? Where are we? What does this mean that the language of the axis of resistance seems to be back from the dead all of a sudden?
So it is sort of instrumentalization of the Palestinian cause because it is really dear to the people. It is important to the Syrian people, to the Arabs, non-Arabs in the Middle East. So Iran is doing the same thing. It is instrumentalizing the Palestinian cause to expand its influence in Iraq, in Syria, and in Lebanon. And these three countries are now within the dominion of the Iranian regime. I don't see any liberatory dimension in this. The Iranians are responsible of killing and of the destruction of Syria. They were against, systematically and principally, they were against any political solution in Syria. They never, ever expressed their respect for the Syrian demands for freedom, for justice, for a better political life. And they are doing it in Iran itself. However, you cannot crush your people while you now a growing percentage of the Iran population are against the Palestinian cause because it has been used by the Islamic Republic to justify crushing the last revolution, for instance, and all the protests in Iran before this. Qasem Soleimani literally walked on the blood of our brothers in Aleppo before he was killed. I know that he's considered, unfortunately, this is a bloody mistake, that he's considered sort of a revolutionary by some sectors of the left in the West. This is really shameful. He is responsible. He's like a colonial commander moving in the colonies of the Iran Empire. They're sort of an empire. Iran has always imperialist aspirations, and now it is there. The American occupation of Iraq actually was great for Iran more than anybody else. Though the Americans are still there, but Iran is the real dominating power in Iraq. In Syria it is the same, and Lebanon even more so. Hezbollah is, they openly say that they are part of Wilayat al-Faqih, which means the name, sort of a religious technical name for the Iranian religious Islamic government. So you give the example of Lebanon. Hezbollah was not only against the uprising in Lebanon, they attacked the protesters themselves. And Hassan Nasrallah himself said, you cannot change the regime. He was not analyzing the struggle. Of course, he meant that will not allow you to challenge it and to change it. So it is just instrumentalizing the Palestinian cause for domination, and with a sectarian dimension. Iran is dividing the region, and there has been so many genocidal massacres in Iraq and Syria because of this pushing, dividing societies and sectarianizing these struggles. In Iraq it happened. It's been happening in Syria for more than 12 years now.
So you've said that the two most formative experiences in your life have been your 16 years in prison and the abduction of Samira. Can you tell us, I guess, a bit about the significance of both or either of these events, and really especially how the ongoing nightmare of Samira's disappearance affects you today?
Because they are formative experiences in the meaning that they change. My long years in jail when I was quite young, quite an intense experience, very long, with torture. All my 20s and more than half of my 30s in jail, and there are no spare parts for your 20s. And when they were in jail, yeah, they are done. So I was 36 when I was released. So it is an experience that changed one. And I was changing actually. And in a way it was emancipatory experience. I was young, I was healthy. So yeah, for most of it, I was able to read and to learn. Yeah. So it was this unique formative experience. Samira is even more intense experience. It is more painful and yeah, it's associated with feeling of guilt, of course. Yeah, I couldn't do anything to help my missing wife. So it is something that I've been living with for almost 10 years. December 9, it will be 10 years. So it is also a changing experience, actually. Yeah, it came when one looks for peace in his life. So from these two experiences, I have two defining struggles. A struggle against a tyranny that destroyed the lives of millions of Syrians in my generation, hundreds of thousands of people were affected directly. Now it is in millions. Actually, every single Syrian has been affected in this wave of struggle. And the other one is against fundamentalism, or what I call at times nihilist Islamists. So I have defining struggle and the meaning that they form my identity. Who I am, I can define myself with these two struggles. I have a third struggle, maybe not defined in the same intense way, which is struggle against colonialism. The 5 colonial powers that I mentioned. But maybe this is not defining in the same way. It is not to say anything positive about colonial powers, but they didn't put me in jail and tortured me, and they didn't take my. It is not only my wife, by the way. It is my brother as well, and my friends, many of my friends. So this meaning, these are visceral struggles that I live with. In my writings, I write much about these, a rather personal way at times, but a more abstract and theoretical way at other times.
Yeah. I mean, there's struggles that are a part of your identity. There are other struggles you might have commitments with, but these define your very self. So something else that maybe is a part of your identity and self now is exile. So you've lived in exile for the last decade, first in Istanbul, now in Berlin. As an intellectual, how do you think about exile, or conceptualize or theorize exile? And as a person, how has it affected you in your perspective on the Syrian struggle?
I always think of exile in relation to jail. Actually, I have a small book. It is an essay available in English. By the way, it is Freedom, Home, Jail, Exile, and the War. It is available in German and Italian in booklet form. So, in jail, you are in a certain space, not allowed to go out. In exile, you are in a certain space, you are not allowed to go back. So you are imprisoned outside, so to speak, in a way. So I see this sort of a continuation. This also refers to the defining struggles. One of them, the idea that I got, and I have a book about jail, And this book is about freedom, actually. I mean, every writing about jail is writing about freedom. And writing about exile is, in a way, writing about home and homeland. So for me, now, exile is a continuation of jail in a different way, and at the same time, it changes the perception of home. I was not able to write about my years in jail itself. I am unable now to write about exile and exile. For me, home is the only place in which I can write about exile. So I need Syria for this. Home is the place in which I can write about exile, or in which the story can be complete. My story will never be complete unless the only place for this story to be complete is Syria. Not, I was in Turkey, I am now living in Germany, so there are 200 countries in the world. None of these 200 countries is the right place to complete the story. It is only one tragic country or terrible country, Syria. So, yeah, I mean, you see that exile is changing my perception of home, my role. Well, of course, I have much. I am moving in the world now. I have never had a passport before 2018, and I guess this was the reason I didn't come.
Yeah.
I don't remember really what was the reason, but I didn't have a passport before the end of 2018 for the first time in my life. So I am moving, and I don't have personal reasons to complain. I'm okay. But I don't have any personal thing remaining. Everything is public, everything is political, everything is, yeah. I don't like this because it denies you privacy, but it is what it is, and I don't want to complain.
So Berlin, this flows directly from what Wendy was asking you about in terms of exile. I saw you in Berlin in 2019, and you took me to an extraordinary event, cultural event in the Syrian community, and introduced me to this amazing range of Syrian activists, writers, filmmakers, people working in different NGOs and social service agencies, young people. It was just kind of a dizzying experience. And at the end of the night, I asked you, as we were saying goodnight, I said, you know, how are these Syrians in Berlin specifically, but more generally in exile, how are Syrians processing the defeat? And my assumption was that this must be a particularly dark moment, because in 2019, it's really the end, this realization there is no more armed struggle, the Assad regime is going to stay in power, it's over. And you said something counterintuitive that really struck me and stayed with me. You said, actually, this defeat is liberating because it opens the door for the next phase, for people to move on to what's next. And I wondered, and still wonder, what did you mean by that?
I don't remember. I guess it was about the moment of 2011 was behind us, and it should. We should move forward. So we were defeated, we lost. The battle that started in March 2011. I don't want to, I guess I didn't want to be nostalgic. That we know the struggle is continuing. It's continuing, by the way. It is continuing, but you need rapture. You need, yeah, we defeated this round of struggle. We were knocked out, but we were continuing our struggle with different needs. The people you mentioned, the activists, writers, artists are continuing struggle in different way. Actually, even in Syria now, there's an uprising in Sweden that has been going for a month and a half, and very it revives the hopes of change. It will not change Syria, most probably. Sweden is a small government in Syria, a few hundred thousands. So it is, but in a way, it reminds people that our story is still there. Our cause is still there, and the meanings, and the slogans, and the aims, and everything is still there. And it reminds one of the early period of the Syrian revolution. It was very beautiful, with rallies, with peaceful rallies, with songs, with artistic dimension of protest. Yeah, so it is happening again. But in exile, so many people are in a way achieving their own revolutions, and I see this as a continuation of the revolution in different ways, especially the younger generation, and especially maybe a bit more women. I guess my impression is that so many are owning their lives. So we wanted to own our country and we lost, so many growing number of people, especially women, are owning their lives in a more liberated and more, I would say, productive, creative way. So yeah, maybe this is what I meant. Honestly, I don't remember.
It was late at night, you shouldn't be held responsible for these statements. Wendy?
Right, so maybe we'll have our last question then, is to end with a vision for action. What is your message for progressives and social justice activists, like the kind of people who show up to a Haymarket event? What do you want comrades here in the United States and elsewhere to know or to do?
I think, I guess you know Ala Abdel Fattah, the Egyptian activist who's been in jail for almost 10 years now, on and off, mostly in and on, right? Yeah, mostly in jail, but he was half released for a short period, 2020, I guess. Allah, as a book, it's available in English. You have not been defeated yet.
I believe it's published by Haymarket.
Really?
No? My bad. I just assumed that all great books are published by Haymarket. Sorry.
So, on a similar question, Allah said to us a conference somewhere in Europe, I guess, and he said, defend your democracy. So the answer is defend your democracy, because democracy is a crisis everywhere in the world. Democracy and social justice and freedom and the rule of law is endangered everywhere, I guess, in the US, like, of course, not like in Syria, but this is a crisis everywhere. And this blind support of a fascist regime in Israel is another proof that there's something extremely wrong. So the main thing is that to defend democracy, what I find, I am really scared the developments of the last 10 years, not only because of the huge human suffering and misery that we are seeing, but because we no longer have any viable alternative. We don't have an ideal. We no longer have an ideal. I mean, democracy is in crisis everywhere, and so we have a battle. We have to revive the ideal of justice. I would say of socialism in a way, because I don't mean the concept of communist socialism. I mean the presence of those who are absented. In the US, I guess, people of color Women, since Athens, classic Athens, women, slaves, and foreigners were relegated to inferior status. It is almost the same in modern democracies. The working class, women, people of color, immigrants, refugees are relegated to invisibility or to secondary status. So, socialism, I mean by socialism, the presence of those who are absent, the working, communism. What was good about communism is that it was the presence of the working class. It was the way the working class broke through the stage of politics and national politics. So, in this meaning, I feel that the presence of those who are absented will, and this included, by the way, the biosphere, the environment of the planet. So, because it is absented even more than slaves and so yeah, in this meaning, socialism can rejuvenate democracy. And I guess these are fields of struggle, very, very important, very vital, and very, they are our struggles now. At times, the people here, I'm not sure, the US, but you hear people in the West saying that, they don't have causes to struggle for. Unlike Edward Said said something similar, that one of his friends envied him that Edward Said had a cause and he was fighting, and his colleague, he felt sorry that he didn't have a cause. I think, well, this was narrow-minded, and you can fight. There's so many issues to fight for. There are so many causes, and so my message is we have so many to fight for, and we have to fight.
Questions, comments?
2 weeks ago, I was in Idlib City, and we were bombed out of Idlib City. Press coverage lasted about 10 hours before the Gaza event happened. My question is, I understand the revolution's defeat, but how do you see it ending? How do you see this phase actually ending? There was a front line, there was bombing, borders were closed, so the defeat might have happened, but how do you actually see it ending?
The ending, the war.
Ending as, how do you see this phase of it concluding, closing up, changing, moving on?
The Syrian.
Or is it going to stay in this level of waiting for the next wave to come? Because I was there with a wonderful social psychiatrist who was adamant in making sure that the population in Idlib was treated as revolutionaries and not as beneficiaries. And so she was adamant in making sure that the spirit of revolution was reflected and respected. And so the question I have is, how do you see that changing, evolving? I'm not sure what word I'm trying to find.
I really don't have an answer of this. I mean, you see that, as I've said, there are 4 Syrians, so Idlib is part of is one of the 4 Syrians. There's the area dominated by Turkey through some Syrian proxies in the north west. There's northeast with the Americans through PYD as their proxies, and Russia and Iran. Their proxy is the regime, is the Assad regime. So Syrians are outside the political arrangements about the country. There are, however, there is no horizon, there is no promise. There is no promise at all. I mean, not by any power in the world. Syrians are not promising anything at all. I mean, not in any region. The only promise by the regime, by the way, is to stay in power forever. I mean, which is a permanent fight against future. And I mean, Idlib is controlled by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and it is not revolutionary by it is an organization. They are showing some realist, they are more realist now, and you can go there without being in danger. Yeah, many people are doing that. No, they're sort of perestroika, Salafi jihad perestroika, if you want. Yeah, but they are not revolutionary in any way. I believe that there are many revolutionaries, and by the way, they assassinated some revolutionaries just 2 or 3 years ago. So, there are revolutionaries in the areas outside the control of regime, and by the way, they show it solidarity with Gaza, who they are being bombed themselves. They were able, there's a certain level of freedom in a way. No, they are not free, they are not organized, but they can express themselves more than in the areas controlled by the region. I wish I had an answer to this question. It is extremely difficult, hard, and unequal development of these 4 Syrians. So, with 4 occupation, 5 occupation powers, you can I cannot put it. I don't know. I wish I had an answer. In Syria, and I think in a wider Middle Eastern, Arab, Middle Eastern region, Islam came to play the role of the limit of political poverty. Because I said that the Syrians were under political poverty line, denied the right to speak and the right to gather, or the right to assemble. So, political poverty is when you are under Islam. You cannot speak and you cannot gather. Islam played the role of a limit of this because there is only one opinion that however the regime is brutal, they cannot suppress this opinion, which is scriptures, holy texts. And there is only one gathering that they cannot disband, however brutal they cannot disband, which is gathering of prayer, of believers in mosques, and churches, actually. So that's why religion came to play this growing role. When we were, at the same time, in the 1980s, we communists and Islamists were put in jail. They were dealt with far more harshly, to be honest, more than us. In spite of this, they were not eradicated to the degree that we were exterminated, we were eradicated. Because of this structural thing, the limit of political poverty. But when we talk about religion playing this political role, religion and politics, it is in a country with many religions and commercial communities, this is sectarianism. This combination of religion and politics is sects, is sectarianization of struggles. So that's why in the last 40 years, in my opinion, that's why religion came to play this important role. I am not talking about Salafi jihadism here. Salafi jihadism is a global phenomenon that appeared in Afghanistan and it was patronized by the Americans. It was the struggle against Soviet Union who occupied Afghanistan in 1979, and the Americans and the Saudis and the Pakistanis and the Egyptians in the days of Saddam. They were the sponsors of jihad in Afghanistan. So Salafi jihadism is a global phenomenon from the very beginning. It is They are foreigners everywhere. But wherever there's a destroyed country, like Afghanistan in those days, or Iraq after the American occupation, or Syria after crushing, or the regime started the war against the revolution, they prosper. They are okay when a country is destroyed.